Hi, greetings. This is Eric at the Mute Shokai Dojo here in Austin, Texas. During COVID times, so my hair is getting long, my beard is getting long, and I'm just hanging out in my eccentric yukata. But I wanted to figure out a way that I could connect with other Aikido people and still continue to share through this time of, well, for a lot of us anyways, is isolation. So I wanted to look a little bit at the etymology of the word Aikido, right? So, because a lot of times as Westerners, we find that we're naturally very separated from a lot of the cultural symbols and things that make up Japanese culture and society. Because, well, honestly, Japan is quite alien to a lot of us. I had the opportunity to train in Japan for 3 years, but by no means am I an expert. My language is very broken. But I think that this is an important topic an interesting topic to talk about because honestly, how many of us as Westerners get to the point where we're a black belt, Nidan, Sandan, and Aikido, and you don't even know how to write the word? And well, that's okay. It's a cool thing about the arts is that there's so many layers to it and so many different little paths and avenues of weapons and reiki and um, all sorts of aspects of martial arts that we can explore as we continue on. So I'm definitely not shaming anybody. This is something that I got into, and I want to share my knowledge. So even if it's not something that you really want to pursue Chinese characters or anything, that at least it can add to your understanding. So let's take a look at etymology. What is etymology? Etymology is the study of the origin of words and the way in which their meanings have changed throughout history. By the way, I'm drinking a little mead I made tonight. So etymology, the origin of words. As a warning, though, etymology is all like politics or religion or something that the people that are into it really get dug into their particular uh, ways that they think about it. So if you encounter somebody else somewhere down the road that will tell you about these particular characters that we're going to go over, they might have different opinions and they might be very hardcore about it, just as a warning. But so what the stories I'm going to share about these characters are not the truth, but they're stories and myths and legends that I've learned about these particular things, characters that have enriched my practice, and hopefully they'll help you enrich yours. Like I said, my language skill is fairly broken in Japanese, but before I moved to Japan, I sat down with one of my Aikido teachers, and he was like, don't do martial arts when you go to Japan. You need to do something like, ink painting or calligraphy. And I'm like, yeah, right. So when I got to Japan, I like scheduled my martial arts as like every day I was going to do kendo and judo and aikido and kyudo. And the end of like 3.5 weeks or a month, I was in the middle of a judo match. I lifted up this big old heavy guy, and I felt a line of pain just shoot down my back all the way to my tailbone. And actually, that same pain 20 years later, I feel tonight. So, anyways, I became somewhat disabled for a while, and I had to really change my focus to what my teacher had recommended to start looking at calligraphy. And so that's one of the things that I got into. Again, my skill is very mediocre, but it was still a good and deep study for me. So, my relationship with the kanji, kanji means Chinese characters, and it's the language, one of the alphabets that the Japanese people use to write. And of course, it's the language that the Chinese people use to write. They're related, but it's kind of separate at the same time. I don't want to get into it. But my relationship with kanji is they're like runes or magical symbols for me. Since I can't pick up a newspaper and just read very easily, I have to struggle with it. That a lot of the times, especially now that I've been living back in the States for 17 years, it's not part of my daily life, but it still is part of my martial arts practice because I'm very interested in the terms and the words. And so they become like Nordic runes. They're symbols that I can look up and ruminate on and write with my calligraphy brush or carve into things. And so they become kind of a magic language, which is interesting because going back to the history of these characters. Oracle bones are really where the Chinese written language got started. So somewhere like 1250 BC, I believe. I think it was in southern China that shamans started carving symbols into bones and tortoise shells, and then they throw them into a fire, and the fire would crack the bones or the shells, and then they pull them out, and by the way the cracks went through the various symbols, they could do their fortune telling or see the future or try to, create, destroy their enemies or whatever else that shamans do. And so really, Chinese characters at its core was a magic language. About 300 years later, it started being the first written records appeared during the Shang dynasty. So let's take a look at what characters are. So kanji, Japanese characters, literal translation, at least in Japanese. Let's see, our glyphs are often pictographs, whose components may depict objects or represent abstract motions. Okay, you with me? So a lot of them are actually drawings of mouths and rivers and mountains and stuff like that, and they kind of compact them all together to form words. Sometimes there are symbol things like just it says fire, but oftentimes they're called compounds. Where they take two pieces like fire and something else and put it together to make a new word, right? Okay, so these are called radicals, these little pieces that they put together. And kanji can have, from 2 to, there's a really complex Chinese soup word that I think has like 15 radicals on it, right? So, let's see, I wrote out here, Aikido, right? Aikido. These are the 3 characters that we're going to be looking at today. And the first one, I believe it's also pronounced go. It's been a while since I've looked it up, right? It's got a lot of different definitions for it because, of course, its language is complex in English or in Japanese, and it begins to layer on different meanings to it. So there's one for like, if you pronounce it I, it's like between seasons, like between seasons clothing and gear. It also means like condition, state, situation. Also with au, it means, which I think this is really what the meaning of this character is. It is to come together, to merge, to unite, to fit, to meet, to fit, to match, to suit, to agree with, to be correct. And I think kind of ruminating over a lot of those different meanings is important, because a lot of times people are like, oh, Aikido is the art of love, and they think that's the I. Well, that I is totally different from this I. This means to, meet or to fit is really, I think, the best words for it. So let's take a look at the pictograph here. What is it that we're actually looking at? And I've read a lot of different things. Like people think that the radicals are things. And here is what in Chinese Etymology.com, a great website for kanji nerds, really gets down to what the oldest parts are. All right. And so this is an inverted mouth. And this is, well, the current character for mouth, right? And so, really, it'd be there a little bit like that. And so what this means is it's a mouth talking to another mouth. And it has kind of this connotation, at least in the old Chinese, of to come to an agreement. And I also like to see it as, well, when two people meet, they're talking to each other. So you have two mouths talking to each other. And in a lot of dojos, that's all that really goes on. I know that kuchiwaza, kuchi meaning mouth, is or talking too much is a common thing in a lot of Aikido dojos, right? So that one is a fairly simple one. I, right? To meet, to fit. Now, ki gets really complicated. There's so many different opinions on this one. Originally, it was written completely different, and I had it written down somewhere, but I totally lost it. It doesn't matter. And a lot of people think that this is kind of a substitute for the original part of it. Let's see. Ki. In modern Japanese, it's, I think that's a correct stroke order. It looks like this. My little tail got a little crazy there. But that's the boring version. Never use that version. It's called a simplified version. We're going to take a look at this version here, right? This is the version that you see Morihei Ueshiba wrote on the big calligraphy piece at Aikikai Hombu, right? This is ki, or in Chinese, chi. It means like spirit, mind, heart, disposition, motivation, intention, moods, feelings, atmosphere. For me, nowadays, it really means, I feel like it means movement of some sort. Like your emotions move, the weather moves, your blood moves, and the word electricity moves. And these are all words in Japanese that use this word ki in it, right? So, originally, the top part was written like this, right? And it's to mean like clouds flowing through the sky. This was how it was written in the old Oracle bone script, right? It means kind of like feeling of the sky or something like that. But in order to avoid confusion, because this also means three in Chinese, that eventually they started making it kind of have these little wavy things like that as time went on, right? So let's see here. Let me look at my notes. Now the bottom part is kind of really interesting. So the bottom part, it goes like this, and this is kome, which comes from, which is uncooked rice, essentially. This particular radical or part of the big kanji, the word kome comes from komeru, which means to do with one's heart, or it's basically kind of what farmers do. They grow things with the heart, which is kome, right? Now this particular radical is made up of even smaller parts, and this is one I have never been able to verify through any scholarly books, but this is what some of my calligraphy friends taught me in Japan, right? That kome is made up of, that is 8, kind of a backwards 8 in Japanese, right? And then you put 10 there, because that cross is 10, and then you do another 8. So it's 8 times 10 is equals 80, plus 8 is 88, and it takes 88 days to grow rice. So then you have your rice, right? Okay. Now, when we start getting into the full character, this one here, what does it mean when you take these clouds and vapors on rice? A lot of people see this as cooking rice and the vapors are coming off of it, right? There's so many different sort of interpretations that, let's see, one scholar wrote that said this is air generated from digesting food, which, all right, a burp, I guess. Though so I saw some people refute that and said that this is actually means an offering of grain, which I kind of like that idea of ki being as a present or as an offering. It just kind of neat. So another person I thought had an interesting interpretation of it is they have been told that in order to breathe that you have to eat. So like food is kind of the essence of the breath. And this vapor radical up here is representing, I don't know, the life that's given from food. All of them, I think, are pretty interesting interpretations of it. But anyways, needless to say, that is a particularly complicated little character with a lot of different parts to it. Hope you enjoy that. Let's see. Another thing that's kind of interesting about, the kome part, I wish I had a little bit better notes. This is also the character that represents the United States nowadays. And so, let's see, it's a Beigoku, which would be, the land of uncooked rice or the land of rice. Usually in Japan they write America for America, but this is, the official character, I guess, for country that I live in. So that's the first two, I and ki, right? Now let's take a little look at do. Of course, in Chinese, they say Dao, or I think Gao, means path or road. Right, and this one's interesting. Like, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. When I was living in Japan, since I hurt my neck, I got involved in the calligraphy circles, and so I ended up, going to calligraphy trainings, talking with a lot of calligraphy people. And one of the guys was really cool. He was a scholar of ancient Chinese poetry, and he told me about this character, and some of the etymology behind it. So the character is. This is the first part of it, or the first radical. And it's made up of smaller radicals, but let's just take a look at this one. This means neck or head or dismissal or firing from a job. I think the dismissal or firing from the job part is kind of interesting, and it'll kind of come into the meaning later, because a lot of times, ancient China, ancient Japan, they were pretty rough cultures, and, beheadings were kind of part of losing the job. And so I think that this head, neck, that's part of it. For us Aikido people, this would be the kubi, or as in te, hand, kubi, wrist. So it's the hand, neck. So I guess it's like a narrowing sort of idea behind it. But anyways, this one represents a head. Now the next part of this character, next radical, often has this idea of motion behind it, like something is going. And I personally have always seen it as a road, right? And usually in like the textbooks in Japan, they're like, oh, a man is walking down the road. So what this one scholar told me, he was just like, well, in ancient China, the road would be like a border, or kind of demarks the end of your land. And what you did is you took the heads of your enemies and put them on pikes at the end of the land, or in the crossroads, in order to denote where your territory, your property was. And so that's kind of one of the more brutal histories of this particular character that not too many people talk about. In a lot of modern Japan, a lot of the character's etymology is changed, or the pictographs, they teach it in a different way than perhaps the ancient Chinese people would have used. So anyways, head on a pole, on a road, Dao, path or the way. Well, I can see this video is getting kind of long, so I hope that you found something useful in my ramblings, and I guess I don't need any more characters there. Well, this is Eric from Mute Shokai here in Austin, Texas. Have a great one.